again, back in my leadership development days, one of the authors that we quoted quite frequently said, the leader should only do what only they can do. If you're doing things that someone else could do, first of all, you probably not doing it as well as they could. And second of all, it's keeping you from doing the things that you need to be doing, working on that, getting that next deal put together. You know, working on raising capital. All the things that only you can do in that scenario. Leave the other stuff to people who are better at it than you. What else? Other push points.
Talk a little bit about, I think what I heard a lot of guys say was the rate management stuff, like specifics, best practices, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Boy, and we haven't seen anything like it, like the last year since we've been in business, as far as rates go. Rates have just unbelievably accelerated. And for a lot of reasons, all of which are good for us, unless we're buying. and then those increased rates are causing those prices to go up. I'll tell you how we manage it, first of all, from a philosophy standpoint, and then from a practical, here's what you do standpoint. Our philosophy is we always want to be on the highest end of rates in our market. We want to constantly be putting upward pressure on rates because if we have somebody in here that's paying this much and the street rate is this much, but we're full, we're telling this guy we don't want your $150 because he's paying us $100. We'd rather keep his. So our philosophy is keep upward pressure on those rates because when you're full at 95%, 97%, you're telling somebody no every day. Sorry, we don't have any of those. And if you're above 88% or so, then you've got some sizes that you just don't have any of. So you're potentially telling people, no, we can't do business with you today, even though they'd be willing to pay your current street rate. And you're telling them no at the expense of somebody who's paying you a lower rate. So, and we've taken advantage of this in a lot of those acquisitions that we've pulled off in the last couple of years because mom and pop didn't want to raise rates. They etched them in glass on a piece of paper, put them under glass, never to be changed. And that paper's yellow by now, but by God, they're not changing those rates. And they're feasting on the fact that they're 100% full. And we bought a lot of facilities where the owner bragged about the fact we've been 100% for the last 3 years. And we just go, can't wait to lower that. Well, think about it. So I'll give you an example. One of the things we do in our consulting business is operations audits. And we'll come in and audit your operation and tell you, here's some things you could be doing. And Bob spoke at a show in Vegas about 2.5, 3 years ago. And was talking about these audits and had a guy come to the back of the room and talk to me about coming to his facility. And he was actually in Las Vegas. So we flew out a couple weeks later. I think he had 1,100 units. And he did $160,000 a month. That was his revenue. And so I went through the thing, and they were 97% full, and had been for a long time. He was proud as he could be. He was a CPA, I think. Met me there, introduced me to the manager who'd been there for some years, and his son who was trying to learn the business. He left. I spent the day with the manager and the son, walk around. They were doing things pretty well. Came up with a few operational issues, and then we sat down at the end of the day, and I said, the number one thing you've got to do is you've got to raise your rates. And the manager jumps up almost, he didn't actually jump, but it seemed like he jumped up and he said, oh, we can't do that. I said, why can't you? He said, last time we tried to raise rates, there was a holy hell around here. I said, really? I said, what happened? Oh, I had people coming in here left and right. I said, really? How many? Well, I don't know, but it was a lot of people. Well, how many? 5 people came in and chewed his ear off over rate increase out of 1,100. Chewed his ear off. And this was 3 years earlier that they'd raised rates. I said, what if you raise rates today? You're at 98%. How many people you think would move out? Oh, a lot, he said. How many? How many is a lot? Well, I don't know, but I mean, it'd be a lot. I said, well, do you think 100 people would move out? Well, no, not 100. I said, well, you better hope 100 people move out. Because right now you're sitting at 97%. If 100 people moved out, you'd be at 87%. And now those other 90% of people are paying your new rates. And you're able to say yes to everybody who comes in the door instead of no because you're full. And this owner, I'm describing all this, and this owner is going, he'd let the manager convince him for the last 3 years, oh boss, we can't raise rates. Man, we'd be in big trouble if we raise rates. I said, what if you raised your rates 10%? That's another $16,000 a month. What's the math on that for a year, Ian? A year for 3 years that this guy's left on the table because 5 people chewed his ear off. I don't think he's still there anymore, but the owner learned something that day, and we ought to learn it. Rate management is about maximizing our asset. We would never buy something and then try to lower the value of it. We want to maximize the value of it, and the best way you can do it, there's a lot of ways. We can look for other revenue sources, like we mentioned over here earlier. We can look at other streams. We can expand. But the single biggest way is our existing tenant base, is to scooch the rates up on them. And most of the time, if we have a rate increase that's, reasonable, whatever that means in any given month, you don't lose any. We didn't raise rates during COVID on any of our properties. But last April 1st, rate increase across the board. We have about 3,000 units, and we lost, I think, 5 or 6 people moved out because of the rate increases.
What percentage increase was it?
It ranged between 15 and 20%. So we had some people who had been there a long time. Our rate increase policy is we don't ever bring people all the way up to street rate. We scooch them up and scooch them up and scooch them up a little at a time. And we lost, I think it was 6 across the board. That was a pretty good payday that next day. The difference between April 1st and March 1st was pretty big. Yeah.
Do you do it once a year or twice a year? Schedule?
We do rate increases every month, but we do it on everybody who hasn't had a rate increase in the last 6 months. So basically everybody gets raised twice a year, every 6 months.
Do you have a program for that, or is it done manually?
Our software, SiteLink and StoreEdge, we use both. They have a revenue management component that we set parameters for. And we go in there, first thing I do once a month is I go in there and adjust street rates. And I do those manually because I want to see how many we've rented, whether an increase in street rate is warranted, and boy, they have been for the last year. And then I go and do rate increases for everybody who had one in the last 6 months, or beyond 6 months. That way, every month, we're affecting theoretically about 1/10 of our database instead of everybody at once. And that helps us if we get out of control on those rate increases. They'll let us know, the market will let us know, but only 1/10 of them instead of all of them. So that's our way of kind of managing that process without it getting out of control, and it allows us to continually be watching street rates. We have an algorithm in the software that watches street rates and manages that, and we use that, but we also manually look at it once a month.
So for example, if somebody's, let's just call it $40 below street rates, are you raising them, 25%? Like, what do the stages look like to get them to the $40?
Yeah, they would get a little more than half. So, and $40 depends on is that 40 up to 80 or is that 100 up to 140? It depends on the percentage. Basically, we're going to get at least half of the difference. So they're going to get typically $20 of that. And sometimes just a touch more, again, it depends on how much of that, what the percentage is of that $40. So we get half of it, then next time we get half of it, and theoretically we'll never quite catch street rate because we're constantly raising street rate and pushing them to that. But, average is 10 months, people keep them. So rather than raise rates once a year, we miss out on a lot of people, right? Because they only kept it 10 months. So we do them twice a year to make sure we at least get one crack at them before they turn their stuff in.
Is that the same thesis when you purchase the property and take it over? You're ripping the Band-Aid off day one?
Yeah, we usually go right at it. We go to everybody who's rented beyond 6 months. So if they rented under the old management less than 6 months ago, we keep them in there until the next month, and we get that. And then the next month we get that month, and we put them in that program. Yeah.
How much higher, you said you like to be at the top tier of a given market. How
Yeah.
much higher above the competition do you feel like you can be? Like you said, some of these mom and pop stations won't change the rate for 20
Yeah.
years, so they're still $35 for somebody.
Yeah, if they're full, it doesn't matter. We can be $40 higher than them. They don't have one to rent because they're full. So it just depends. In some cases, if we're competing against the REITs, then we try to follow them up because they always constantly upward pressure. Frankly, we don't compete a lot with them because we're in secondary and tertiary markets mostly, where they won't go play.
Right, but that kind of caps how far you can go sometimes in those small markets.
Depends on occupancy. Rates follow occupancy. So if everybody's full, we're not shy at all about pushing that up there. Yeah.
So to piggyback on Ian's question, when you first take over a facility, if you don't have good data, you don't know how long they've necessarily been in that unit, how do you stagger them? How do you plan to stagger them
Yeah.
each month?
Well, it's rare that we don't know their lease date because we get their leases. We get a copy of their lease. So we typically know, we might not know when they had a last rate increase, but we typically know when they rented it. And so we go back, and anybody who rented it prior to 6 months ago, they get hit right away, and then we factor them in. So most software conversions, when we convert them to our software, it tracks the move-in date, but if it doesn't, the leases do. So it's rare that we don't know when they rented it. It's less rare to not know when they last had an increase.